Hey everybody, my name is Shibby. I'm an esports colorcaster and Celestial ranked player in Marvel Rivals, and week 2 of the Marvel Rivals Ignite tournament has just concluded, and I wanted to break down some of the more popular compositions and heroes that we've been seeing rise in Marvel Rivals Ignite so that you guys can use this information in your own ranked games and your own ranked climb. I don't want to keep you waiting any longer, so let's just get into it. So one of the compositions that has kind of come back into the fray, or come back into competitive, at least in the Marvel Rivals Ignite tournament, is Rez Comp. Now, Rez Comp was really dominant in some of the more earlier tournaments we saw, like think MRC Season 0 or one of the first Marvel Rivals Invitationals, but Rez Comp has come back, and I don't know if it's necessarily better than it was before because it did receive nerfs, but I don't actually think it was as bad as a lot of people had claimed, right? Obviously it wasn't in its like most overpowered state that it was in those early seasons, but it coming back into fruition kind of as a soft counter to some of the Punisher compositions, some of these like team wipe ult compositions that we see, I think has been really healthy to see in Marvel Rivals Ignite. You know, Rez Comp is really good at surviving and stalling point. I think Rez Comp shines the best if you're looking at a specific game mode. I think control point is where it's really good because of your ability to hold on to the point if you do win that first fight, because of how long it takes to kind of grind out through the revives, through all these different heroes, the sustain that's in Rez Comp. And if you win that fight, it's really hard to wrestle control away. And for the Rez Comp team or the Rez Comp players, once they, wrestle control of that control point, if they get it to like 85% or 90%, realistically, they just have to win one fight out of the next 3 or 4 if they lose control of that point, and they'll end up winning that round. And so it's really difficult for the other team to kind of respond to Rez Comp if they're playing stuff like Punisher or Storm or maybe even Human Torch. You're really good at, like I mentioned, countering those team wipe ultimates because of the Adam Rez that's available with his ultimate. You can kind of just hide under certain maps. There's a lot of nooks and crannies. A lot of the good Adam Warlock players know where and when to res, and they can bait out and they can play for that res, and then you just drop on top of them, essentially reviving your whole team and coming back with full HP. And that's not to include stuff like Cloak and Dagger or Mantis having their ultimates potentially available. Like, Rez Comp is very good at causing the team to kind of overcommit on their ultimates, and then you kind of hitting with that counter punch, right? This is what we've been seeing a lot of teams doing, waiting for the enemy team or the enemy composition to commit on something like a Punisher ult, like a Storm ult, Human Torch, Groot, all these different, AoE style ultimates. And once they commit, okay, Adam, if you get wiped or you can play for res, you can revive and then revive your whole team, and then we can just drop on top of them with superior ult economy, right? Because realistically, if you trade Adam Warlock, ultimate for like Groot plus Human Torch or like Punisher plus Luna, you are at a +1 advantage. And then as long as you maintain that ultimate advantage, which is something these pro teams have been doing a really good job at, it's very difficult to play, right? You can sometimes drop on top of them with like Cloak and Dagger ultimate after you get res, or even Mantis ultimate, right? And a lot of the time, the Mantis players are the secondary DPS players, so they're able to get max value out of Mantis being a hybrid DPS/support character. I've really enjoyed the, I will say, evolution of Rez Comp and how it does come out in response to certain other compositions. And watching it on Control Point, watching some of the best teams play Rez Comp has been a treat. And I think you guys could implement this into your own game. I think playing it on Control Point, you guys can see the power of this composition because of how difficult it is to move this comp. They're not particularly good at killing anything necessary, right? They don't have the most lethality out of the compositions that we've been seeing Ignite, but by God, they have some of the best sustain. They've got some of the best like anti-ult economy. Like, it's really, really difficult to move Rez Comp once they get control of a point. And you can talk to like all these other teams. You can look at all these other teams and you can see just how difficult it is for them to move these guys off of the point. We have been seeing a variety of different compositions with the newly released Ultron hero. Now, initially, you saw a lot of content creators and pro players talking about Ultron and how he might be bad on release because they got to play him during the like pre-release. They got to play him during the trialing. I know they did buff him when he did release on live, but now that we've had like a month or so, or a little bit over a month with Ultron, you've been really starting to see a lot of these pro teams optimize and understand how to get the best use out of his kit in every single facet. Now, there have been a couple different Ultron compositions that we've been seeing teams run. One of the more popular ones that we've been seeing is kind of like the Ultron flyer comp. Now this usually includes Ultron plus 2 supports. Every single one of these Ultron compositions I'm going to talk about includes 2 extra supports. It's typically Loki and Cloak and Dagger because those are the ones that tend to be open, but sometimes we do get to see stuff like Loki Luna or Cloak and Dagger and Invisible Woman. There have been slight variations on the support backline, but most of the time it is Loki, Cloak and Dagger, or Luna, and it's usually Loki and Cloak and Dagger. And with this flyer variant of these Ultron compositions, typically what's happening is you're going to run something like a Storm or a Human Torch. We have sparingly seen the Iron Man. And what the Ultron is doing is he's going to keep his repair drone on his flyer, right? Either the Storm, the Human Torch, or the Iron Man. And that Iron Man becomes that much more difficult to kill. Also, both flyers will be playing relatively close together. I'm not saying they're like buddy-buddy right next to each other, but as long as they're within the same aerial vicinity, that repair drone will both heal Ultron and the person it's on. So it becomes very difficult for heroes like Punisher or Hela, some of the best Punishers and Helas in the world, to take down some of these flyers, especially if it's Human Torch, because on top of the repair drone, he gets the armor or the bonus HP that he gets from slamming down into the ground. So this composition, I find it really, really difficult to deal with for some people, especially once you pair this Human Torch up with something like a Groot, where you get that Groot Human Torch combo that I talked about in my last video, where it's a ton of AoE damage. It bursts through support ultimates. Both flying styles, or regardless of the flyer you have, it can be very, very difficult for the enemy team to deal with. Most of the time, they're going to be playing something like Punisher plus Hela or Punisher plus Storm and Ultron. Like, they're trying all these different ways to match and deal with this essentially super enhanced or super buffed flyer in the sky. Another Ultron composition that we've been seeing, and it's very, very niche, but it's fairly consistent, is that on first point payload, if you're on the defensive side, we have been seeing this 3 tank, 3 support composition. Now the 3 supports, again, pretty similar. It's stuff like Invisible Woman, Cloak and Dagger, Loki, and then Ultron. And what Ultron does in this case is that he throws his repair drone down onto one of the tanks or one of the supports. And since the 3 tanks and the 2 supports are most of the time playing very clumped together, or they're playing very grouped because they're trying to stall that first point payload, you are getting an insane amount of value and healing out of that repair drone. You're most of the time healing minimum 3 people, sometimes 4 and 5, and your ultimate recharge rate or your ultimate charge rate for Ultron, you're building it up super, super quickly. Coupling that with the healing and the damage he's been able to do, it is a very viable tactic on first point payload to hold right up close with 3 tanks and 3 supports, and the amount of stall potential you have. Even if you die early on, even if you die on that first point, if you stall like 2-3 minutes, most of the time that the defending team is going to swap over to Strange and they're going to TP back in, and now you have to go for round 2 of getting stalled out and just reducing the amount of time. I think it's a really cheesy strat, but honestly, I don't hate it, because even though it's GOATs per se, it's not like consistently good. Like, it does lose its luster after the enemy team, the offensive team, starts gaining momentum and starts, building their ultimates, gets that one errant pick onto the support, whether it's the Ultron, the Loki, whoever, right? That composition very quickly crumbles once one of the pieces goes down, whether it is a tank or a support, but it is very difficult to take them down because of the rotation of the support ultimates. You have Cloak and Dagger ultimate, you've got Ultron, and then you've got Loki copying Cloak and Dagger, and by the time all that's done, the other Cloak and Dagger that ulted a while ago has their ultimate up again, and then you don't even talk about the different tanks that we've been seeing, right? Doctor Strange, Magneto, Thing as well, like so much stall potential here. And yeah, it is a very frustrating comp to play against, and we've seen some teams attempt to break it. I've seen Squirrel Girl being picked into it, Wolverine, you see Iron Man trying to farm ults. There's all these different variations. Some teams have managed to break it, and other teams have been like not completely held, but have been successfully stalled out for 3+ minutes with that kind of 3 support, 3 tank, composition that we've been seeing. We've also been seeing Ultron with no flyers, still 3 supports, and that has been relatively confusing, because sometimes we'll see like Ultron, no flyers, and we'll have like Punisher rounding out that DPS, and then it's like 2 tanks. It's been very interesting to see Ultron kind of rise in relevance into the meta. And if you are one of those teams that I mentioned that is an Ultron team in week 1, right? You either are and you aren't. In week 2, you are pretty much an Ultron team. It just depends on what flavor of composition you're playing, whether you can play all the three I mentioned, which is like the flying Ultron comp, the 3 tank 3 support Ultron comp, or just Ultron with no flyers and just kind of having him as that triple support composition. Or you play one of the three and you just see where it can work and where you can plug it in, whether it's on convergence, payload, or control point. But yeah, a lot of Ultron play in week 2 of Marvel Rivals Ignite, and a lot of good Ultron play specifically. Now, I mentioned him a handful of different times as I was talking about both the Ultron comp and the Rez comp, but Punisher has been kind of a staple within the Marvel Rivals Ignite tournament. Week 1, he was picked up heavily. Week 2, he was picked even more and was even banned more. I mean, he is just fundamentally a very good, strong character at the moment, especially with the rise of, like I mentioned, these flying compositions, things like Human Torch being picked up more frequently, Ultron, like I mentioned. Sometimes you'll see Punisher coupled with Hela as this like double hit scan answer to put pressure on the flyers. Punisher is just all around a very good DPS, has multiple ways to pressure both tanks and supports. Punisher ultimate can shred through support ultimates pretty frequently if aimed correctly. Damage boost from Storm as well. We have been seeing Punisher plus Storm kind of come into the fruition here. The damage boost from Storm, the move speed helps Punisher out a lot in terms of repositioning and getting that little extra damage boost. Allows him, if you have really good aim, if you're aiming for those headshots or you're consistent on your tracking, you can like one clip most DPSs and most supports pretty consistently. I feel like Punisher Storm, though, is a hybrid, because if Luna is available, then you'll see more of the Punisher Storm, because similar to the repair drone, Luna Snow has that snowflake that allows their flyers to play a little bit more aggressively, and you have that safety in consistently having your snowflake on the Storm. And if you're, as long as you're pumping heals into your team, whether it's clap or whether it's normal basic healing, your Storm will most likely be topped off pretty consistently. Also, double AoE ultimates, or double team wipe ultimates in the form of Punisher and Storm seem a bit difficult to counter. Even if you are playing stuff like Loki, Cloak and Dagger, or Loki Luna, it definitely is something that is more frequently built up on the DPS side because of Luna Snow getting nerfed, and how I believe her ultimate charge cost is now at like 4,500, which makes her the highest ultimate charge cost out of all the supports. Typically, you will see Storms or Punishers build their ult up before the Luna Snow. He's also just been a really good natural counter to Groot, which fundamentally is a good opening DPS, especially because either one of Emma or Magneto is pretty consistently getting banned out. So a lot of what these tank players have been defaulting to in this 2-tank setup is like Magneto Groot, Doctor Strange Groot sometimes, or we will see Doctor Strange Magneto. But the fact that we have an abundance of Groot players, I think, or a pretty significant amount of Groot players in Americas, Punisher becomes very good because of his ability to wall break, his ability to farm Groot and farm his ultimate up relatively quickly. He just absolutely shreds through everything that Groot wants to do. When we talk about kind of like support backlines, Loki, Cloak, and Dagger, you've seen me mention them pretty consistently. These two, and I will say Loki specifically, has been pretty much pick ban in Ignite with how insanely overloaded his kit is, plus his ability to build his ultimate up fast. Cloak and Dagger also becomes one of the next best supports within Ignite, simply because a lot of the time we either see one of Loki or Luna Snow banned out, because no team is really willing to give Loki Luna away because of how strong that combo is and how strong that ult stall potential is. So Cloak and Dagger kind of becomes the next best support in line. Also, Cloak and Dagger rises in priority kind of as a soft counter to tanks because of Cloak's Terror Cape, right? And how Terror Cape plus focus firing shreds tanks very easily. The 20% increase in damage that you take when you get hit with Terror Cape, like, tanks have to respect that. And if you don't have your shield up, if you don't have your cooldowns up, you very regularly get shredded pretty consistently by the Cloak and Dagger Terror Cape. And it's much more lethal in a coordinated environment when the Cloak and Dagger is calling out the Terror Cape and everybody looks at that person. It becomes a lot harder to play against here. And Eternal Bond, Cloak and Dagger's ultimate, just has a very wide sweeping range AoE. You build it up relatively quickly. And we talked about how Loki and Cloak and Dagger can effectively swap ultimates very, very quickly in terms of, okay, Cloak and Dagger ults this fight, next fight I'm going to Loki, copy the Cloak and Dagger, and then Cloak and Dagger will be relatively close to their ultimate on the third fight. And it becomes very, very frustrating to play against unless you have like a godlike Magneto, or you have somebody that can burn through some of these support ultimates, right? Think, like I said, Punisher, sometimes Storm can do it. depending on, you know, where they're at. I would say you guys should be abusing Loki and Cloak and Dagger as a backline duo. I know a lot of people don't like playing it. Most people like playing Invisible Woman or Rocket Raccoon in solo queue or something like Luna Snow. But Loki plus Cloak and Dagger is such a strong backline, especially if you and your support duo, if you're doing with another support, can effectively, you know, chain your ultimates off of these fights and can effectively build ultimate. It becomes really, really difficult for the enemy team to play because it feels like every single fight, either Cloak and Dagger has ult or Loki has ult. The last thing I want to touch upon is something that we've been seeing a little bit more sparingly. Dive comps are sort of back in Ignite. I don't know if I want to classify them as like dive comps or like dive is coming back necessarily, but certain dive centric heroes have been seeing more play in week 2 of Marvel Rivals Ignite. We have been seeing an uptick in Captain America specifically, just ran as a solo dive tank by himself, right? He doesn't have something like a Psylocke or a BP with him or anything like that. He's just kind of running in and being super annoying. I'm not saying he's solo tanking. He's just the solo dive threat. And he's really good at pressuring supports. He's also really good at pressuring some of these off-angle DPS players like Hela and really just being a nuisance and being really annoying. His ultimate as well functions as a third strategist ult. It allows you to use it both defensively and offensively, which in higher levels of play in Ignite specifically, you see maximum, you know, efficiency out of the Captain America ultimate. Once he ults, the whole team's following behind him. They're getting all that bonus HP and they are just running through you. And if you don't have an answer to Captain America ultimate, you kind of have to just wait it out and back up here. Now, the dive DPS that we have kind of been seeing somewhat frequently with Captain America is Psylocke. Have been seeing sprinkles of Black Panther here and there, but it's mostly been Psylocke. Despite the nerfs that she's received, a lot of players, or you know, a lot of the like really good Psylocke players in Ignite can still make that character work. And alongside of Captain America, you provide a lot of pressure to some of these, you know, 2 support compositions, especially if you can bait out the Loki lamps that I mentioned, or you can force out Cloak and Dagger, you know, force out that invulnerability cape that they have. Captain America, the constant pressure that he's able to apply on the backline does need to be answered, and you couple that in with a Psylocke who can build their ultimate up relatively quickly, you know, sometimes can trade it for like a Loki ultimate or a Cloak and Dagger ultimate. You're not feeling too bad about it. So I hesitate to say dive is back completely, but it's not as dead as everybody has thought, and you can make certain dive heroes, even in this quote-unquote flyer meta or Punisher meta, you can make it work. If you watch a lot of these top Captain America players, you'll see at how well they are juggling the backline pressure versus playing frontline. A lot of these Captain America players are blocking stuff like Magneto ultimate. They're countering Doctor Strange ultimate. They're countering some of these more DPS ultimates with their own Captain America ult. It is very interesting to see how these high level caps have been playing, and if they're able to make it work into some of the best players, I definitely think you guys at these lower elos can make dive work, can make stuff like Captain America, Psylocke. Even though they've received like rounds after rounds of nerfs, they're still relatively good, and you can play them into these more immobile compositions, into some of these heroes that like to play off angle or like to play to the side. You can punish that. So I still think dive is not fully back, but dive is not dead. That's going to wrap up my breakdown of the most popular compositions that we've been seeing in Marvel Rivals Ignite. I'm hoping you guys can use some of the information in this video in your own ranked climb and your own ranked games before the season ends. I'm also going to be co-streaming the Stage 1 playoffs for Marvel Rivals Ignite, where I have the exclusive Magic Twitch drop. So if you're still looking to get that, that's going to start Thursday, June 26th. We're going to be breaking down heroes, breaking down strategies and compositions that are being used, and talking about pretty much what we do in this video, essentially live on my Twitch channel. That's going to be on twitch.tv/ImShibby. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you next time. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, I'm going to tell you something you've heard a million times before. Like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications on my latest uploads. I try and respond to every single comment in my video because I genuinely do appreciate everyone that takes the time out of their busy schedules to leave one, and I love interacting with my community. If you want to catch more longer form content, I stream over on Twitch about 3 to 4 times a week, where you'll get unedited versions of these videos, as well as we talk about roster moves, patch changes, as well as gameplay over there. If you care about the short form side, I post pretty frequently on YouTube Shorts and TikTok, where you'll get more condensed version of this content, as well as highlights from my stream, amongst other things. I'm also on Twitter, and all of this will be in the description box below, as well as a pop-up that will form on the right side where you can catch me on all the different platforms. I genuinely appreciate everyone that stops by on this channel and watches all my videos, and I hope to see you in the next one.